And before we go to our panel, we'll take you now to some live pictures coming into us from UCLA in Los Angeles, where it's just gone 3 a.m. and police are still in a standoff with protesters. Police having to stand arm in arm, right? Police called in a standoff with these protesters. We know that they have descended into chaos at multiple universities across the US. So another tense night in Los Angeles. We will be bringing you those throughout the evening and keep you up to date with any of the latest information. But right now, let's bring in my panel, Perth Lord Mayor Basil Zempilas and National Senator Matt Canavan. Hi to you both. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Basil, we'll start with you. I mean, as we've just said, universities are spiralling into chaos in the US, but also now we're seeing a lot of problems across the country. Where is the leadership? Why are Labor and the universities, for that matter, allowing this to continue?
We know that universities have often been a hotbed for free thought. We understand that. We accept that. Largely, we encourage it. But there needs to be some balance, and there needs to be some leaders, whether it's amongst the university cohort themselves, whether it's the staff of the universities, or some senior figures in public life saying, hang on a minute, hang on, guys. All right, we understand there's going to be some support for the Palestinians, but where is the counter support for the Israelis? And what you'd really like to do is you'd like to get the video, the documentary, which is freely available, as you said, Danica, you'd like to take that into the universities around the country and say, before you go out and protest, on the off chance you don't actually know what it is you're protesting about, how about you just have a look at this documentary? Have a look at that, let that sink in, and then see if you want to go and protest the way that you're carrying on at the moment. And the sooner they get that in front of people, the better.
Spot on, Basil, and I would implore people to look at it. It is very confronting, but it really gives you an idea of what so many went through on October 7. It is appalling. Matt, it is extraordinary that here in Australia in 2024, we have a situation where Jewish students are scared to go to university. How did we get here?
Well, look, in part, it's not all the Prime Minister's fault, of course, but in part there has been a vacuum created here by the Australian Prime Minister, who hasn't taken a leadership role on this issue. I mean, we need to be very clear about what we stand for as a country. Of course, we stand against the kind of atrocious violence we saw perpetuated by Hamas on October the 7th. We stand against any forms of anti-Semitism or racist conduct by any groups in our country. And of course, we also do defend the right to people to have their own say and their own views on this matter. So I have no problem defending the rights of students putting forward a view about how the war is being conducted by Israel, about the situation in Gaza. They're right within their rights to do that. What they don't have a right to do is to interfere with other students going about their day. They don't have a right to occupy buildings that would also interfere in those studies, and they certainly don't have a right to just camp on public universities' grounds. So those laws should be enforced by police and a leadership by the Prime Minister. And yes, also the universities have got to get tough here. I mean, if students are doing this, why don't they just get expelled? I mean, that's it. We're paying for most of these students' education. They get paid massive subsidies through the HECS help scheme and government subsidies on top of that. If they're going to flout the rules of the university, that support should be pulled.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fair enough too. Now, let's move on, because it's been revealed the released immigration detainee accused of bashing a grandmother during a violent home invasion had been sentenced to 8 years behind bars for serious drug offences, yet he was somehow still allowed to remove his ankle bracelet, a decision made by the Community Protection Board. Now, the Prime Minister is dodging and weaving again. This was him today.
Have they failed in this instance?
Well, the Community Protection Board is, of course, a board that's independent of politicians.
But have they failed?
Well, I can't. It's not appropriate for me to comment on individual cases.
Basil, Andrew Giles and Claire O'Neill are still nowhere on this issue, and they're refusing to take any responsibility.
They can't be found, no answers from them, and then given the opportunity to say something strong, be a bit positive, perhaps even admit that they haven't quite got it right, the Prime Minister decides to deflect, as we just heard, and not answer what is a simple question. Not for me to give the Prime Minister advice, but I might just give him a little bit. Every now and then, it doesn't hurt to say, you know what, we got this wrong. This situation is unacceptable. We haven't been able to keep tabs on everybody. We weren't able to move quickly enough after the High Court ruling last November. We're working to get it right. We're doing everything we can. And here's what it is that we're doing. But when they duck and dive and dodge and don't front up, what are we supposed to think? It's been an absolute calamity, and a grandmother where I live, in this city, in this state, has copped the absolute pounding that we've seen allegedly by one of these people. It is simply not good enough, and the Prime Minister and his team should be speaking up more ferociously against what has taken place.
Absolutely, and we are going to cross live to Perth shortly, where another detainee has been charged for allegedly breaching his visa orders. But Matt, this is a mess. How will Labor get this under control?
Well, I've got to take responsibility in the first instance. I mean, what you saw there from the Prime Minister was a clear contravention of the old sign on President Freddie Truman's desk that says the buck stops here. I mean, where does the buck stop here? It certainly is not stopping at the ministers' desks, who are taking no accountability, no responsibility, and can't be found. I mean, maybe we need to put an ankle bracelet on some of these ministers so we know where they are and can try and track them, because where are they? But the buck should stop with the Prime Minister, and he needs to take responsibility for the decisions made by the Community Protection Board that he has set up under this process. And I think we deserve answers about whether he thinks this is right or wrong. He should be getting across what the details here are, asking questions. And if a mistake has been made, let's make changes and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because right now, what has happened, of course, over the past few months has been a shambles, as you have said. And the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have any idea about how to fix it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that picture of that poor grandmother is just heartbreaking every time you see it. Look, we're almost out of time, but I just want to get you both commenting on this story. The number of school students identifying as neither male nor female is now 20 times higher than before the pandemic. That's according to data released by the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority. There were at least 2,500 school students who enrolled as non-binary last year. Basil, this is interesting because not all schools participated, so this is actually probably a smaller figure than in reality. What's going on here?
Well, I think the environment has been created where people feel like there are now alternative answers that they can give, whether or not they are genuinely challenged by that question. And so it's impossible not to think that that number is inflated simply because of the environment that now exists, where that style of thinking is okay. There will be some kids who just don't know. I accept that. I get it. They're confused. They don't know. But that many? I doubt it. And that's the environment that's been created.
Yeah, it's a huge number. Basil, Zempilas, Matt Canavan. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.